and welcome to the latest episode of the Addicted to Cars podcast. I am Scott Newman, and with me is that guy, Stephen Ottley. Hello, Stephen.
Hey, Scott. How's it going, mate?
Very well. It's a new week, which means we're talking cars, and lots to talk about this week. We're going to talk about some engines,
Brum,
then we're
brum.
going to talk about some utes, and then we're going to talk about some hot hatches, and then we're going to talk about some racing cars. So that sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
So let's start with the news, and one bit of news I saw this week was BMW M division has effectively extended the life, kind of indefinitely, of its lovely turbocharged straight six, which is good news. So it's basically going to make it EU7 compliant.
Yes. With some new fancy technology, yeah?
It is. It is funny how, not to rain on BMW's parade, because I'm actually very happy about this news, but they do say that it's new. That it's new. Get your umbrellas out.
Here we go.
It says it's new technology and patented. Kind of overlooking the fact that this is exactly the same tech that Maserati put in the Nettuno V6 and the MC20 6 years ago. So
details, Scotty. That's details, man.
Yeah. So it's basically it's pre-ignition system, which, if you don't know, let me give you a quick background on this. So the big problem was, yes, take some notes. There will be a quiz. So basically, as part of the latest EU regs, I think it came in at EU6, engines had to run in what was called stoichiometric air-fuel ratio, which means previously you could dump a whole bunch of fuel into an engine to cool it. Really, really good way of cooling the engine, keeping temperatures under control. Running stoichiometric means you couldn't do that. You have to have a static 14.7 to 1 fuel ratio at all times, which gives you a big problem trying to make power then, because the engine gets really hot and explodes. And not bad for knocking and stuff like that.
I'm not an engineer by trade, but engines exploding is a bad thing.
Well, sometimes.
Okay.
So they had to get clever and find ways of getting around this. One of it was expanding capacity, which is partly why Porsche went to a bigger engine, the 3.6 litre, for its GTS models and turbos. But also the other way is pre-ignition. This has been around for a long time, but the Maserati was kind of the first modern application. So if you picture a cylinder, this now, even the BMW engine as well, you have a tiny little cylinder above it with its own spark plug. So therefore, that then fires, and long story short, you get to have a much more complete burn of everything in the cylinder. So
it's just more efficient, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So instead of, 5%, 2%, 3% wasted fuel, which would typically go out the exhaust, you get a much cleaner burn, and that reduces emissions. So now BMW has adopted this from July. BMW M3s and M4s will have it. BMW M2 from August, and you really won't notice much change because all the outputs apparently going to stay the same, but you will get reduced fuel consumption, apparently, especially at high loads. So if you're doing a track day, instead of doing let's see, an M3, M4 and track will probably do 45 litres per 100k, you might do 30 now, which is also pretty cool. I mean, that's good.
It's super green.
But it's a cool way we're seeing this tech of extending, because obviously BMW's making a big deal about the electric M3, right? That's going to be the performance leader, but it's also invested in ICE tech. And
let's be honest, I don't think there's a lot of people, now correct me if I'm mistaken, dear listeners, there's not a lot of people just tearing up at the notion that we're going to have internal combustion M3, M4, M2 in the future instead of electric ones.
No.
Look, electric performance is great. We talked about it last week. If you haven't listened to last week's episode where I talked about the Hyundai Ioniq 6N, electric cars can be awesome. And arguably, that Ioniq 6 is a fantastic car. It'd probably, might probably keep up with an M3 around a track for, half the price, basically. But I'd probably still take an M3 just because, I like internal combustion, and I think...
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the reality is...
That's why BMW's done so well in this transitionary period. It's given choice.
Yeah.
And it will and clearly will continue to give choice.
Yeah.
What was interesting, I spoke, as part of a roundtable, I didn't speak to him, to Frank Van Meel, who's the boss of BMW M. And what he did say was interesting, though. I asked him, does it give an opportunity for your ICE cars to not necessarily worry about performance? Because you've got this 1,000 horsepower IM3 over here now that obviously the petrol cars can't compete with. And torque vectoring, quad motors, it's going to be way faster than a petrol M3. But he said, no, we've still got to keep moving forward. And that kind of surprised me because I think this frees them up. And I wanted to get your thoughts on it. I would have thought this frees you up from the power race a little bit and maybe go back to maybe take the all-wheel drive out of again, make it lighter. And it'll be a bit slower, but again, give the customer what they want. Aren't we sort of hankering for that sort of back-to-basics sports car?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an argument. I mean, people love the M2, right? Like, because, and they say it's sort of because it kind of reminds them of what the M3 used to be before the M3, M4 became more complex, all-wheel drive, heavier,
Although now they're doing an all-wheel drive M2.
Physically bigger. But, I think there's an argument. I mean, the 911 GT3 is not the most powerful 911, right? Like, and that's okay. It was never meant to be the most powerful. I guess M3, M4 is a little different in the sense that it is sort of the hero M car. But yeah, for me, I think that would be a missed opportunity. I think there's constant. I think in general we've gotten to a point with cars where we have enough power. Realistically, like it's crazy. I mean, we'll talk about hot hatches later in this episode. The average hot hatch now has got over 200 kilowatts, and it's probably not necessary, to be honest. Like, would I prefer a, 350 kilowatt rear-wheel drive, lighter, more agile M3, M4 compared to a, 600 kilowatt version? Like heavier. Like, I personally hope that they would go back to. I would love it if they did give you that option where you can have the 1,000 horsepower electric all-wheel drive, loaded up with technology version of the M3 if you just purely want the fastest one. But I think there is going to be a market, especially in the not too distant future, as more and more electric cars come, as more electric performance cars come. There's going to be this, the vinyl crowd, so to speak, right? There's these people where, you can get digital music. Yes, you can have it on, you can carry 1 million songs on your phone or whatever. But some people just like the sound of vinyl, and so it seems silly, right? But like in our lifetime, like the vinyl record player almost became extinct, and now there's dozens of them at the local, JB. Like, I think there's going to be a push from buyers to car makers saying, "Hey, we want the analog version. We want the, engaging."
Like you say, Porsche taps into this really, really well.
Yeah.
Through the GT department.
Yeah.
And to give you an example of I don't know if you've driven like an M3 or an M4 CS.
No, not yet.
Like, they are better, but it's also more. It's like it's more power. It's, and having driven those cars, what I kind of wanted from a CS as a driver's car was, well, let's make almost a back to basics one. You used to use the base manual, which is a little bit less powerful, but apply the weight saving and the geometry tricks and all that sort of stuff to that car and have like your purists M3 or M2 or anything like that. Whereas otherwise you get the new Audi RS5, which I'm sure will be actually a pretty good car, but it's 2,380 kilograms because it's a FEV and everything like that.
Yeah.
You have the disease of more. So
it
just surprised me that he didn't say, you know what? We've seen what Porsche's doing. Maybe we can build a car that is slower than the previous one, but it's catering to those, like you say, the vinyl crowd. So it'll be interesting to see which manufacturer does that first. Because, like you say, electric cars solve the performance question. Like, they're so fast and so capable that, you can't compete with the petrol engine. But anyway, the other petrol news.
Speaking of petrol engines,
horsepower trains. Now, had you heard of horsepower trains?
I've heard of horsepower, but I had not heard of horsepower trains. No, I believe it's a Chinese company based in England.
It is based in England. It's owned 45%, so majority owned by Renault and Geely, sort of a spin-off from that. And then recently, I think last year, Aramco, unsurprisingly, being a fuel supplier, an oil supplier.
Well, if you're gonna
purchased a 10% stake in an engine company. It's kind of like the first, maybe not the first, but obviously when electric cars came along, right? If you needed a battery pack, you rang LG or rang Samsung, or now maybe you ring BYD and get a Blade battery. Now we're moving into this era where powertrains are rarer. They're kind of a one-stop powertrain shop, which again I'd never heard of, but they're massive. This isn't some startup.
I'm just looking at their website. They've got, I don't know if they are Chinese. They've certainly got a fairly decent footprint in China. They've got plants and R&D facilities there, but they've also got plants and R&D facilities in what appears to be Scandinavia. They've got it in Spain, South America, and then obviously globally headquartered in the UK. But yeah, obviously...
I mean, they make millions of engines. And like, for instance, the new Mercedes CLA is going to have a Horse-supplied 2-litre turbo 4. They've got this little briefcase-sized 1.5-litre turbo engine that can be used as a range extender, stuff like that. But the big news for us is they showed at the recent China... Was it Shanghai?
Beijing. Maybe that's why I thought they were Chinese, because they were showing stuff off in Beijing.
Which kind of... I first heard about it from the Evo podcast. No one sort of reported on it. Was they have a new twin-turbo V6 that revs to 8,000 RPM, produces 400 kilowatts, 700 newton meters, can be mild hybrid or plug-in hybrid to go over 1,000 horsepower, 750 kilowatts. And it's kind of an off-the-shelf... plug and play, like we were just talking about BMW M, right? If Mercedes or if another manufacturer wants to get in the game and do an M3 rival, hey, ring up Horse and they're like, cool, here's a twin turbo 6, 400 kilowatts, 700 newton meters, off you go. So this kind of makes me quite excited that this is... Or what do you think about the whole, I guess, powertrain on demand?
Well, I think I think it's one of those things where you don't always see how the sausage is made, right? Like, there's probably a lot of this stuff that's going on that we're unaware of. It's only really when you start to dive into things that you get the full picture, right? Like, the Supra and the BMW Z4 were built in Austria by Magna Steyr. They were a separate kind of company that just manufactured these cars for these other car companies. We see... Ricardo in the UK helping McLaren with their powertrains and transmissions and things like that. There's a lot of little suppliers out there. Cosworth still builds the engines for Gordon Murray. Like, there are these suppliers, and I think it's helpful, I guess. We're talking about Horse in particular, where they can supply this engine to Nissan, potentially to a GTR, potentially to Alpine if they decide to make some road cars, to potentially to other brands. I don't know what sort of Mitsubishi needs a 1,000 horsepower V6, but
all of them.
Like, they can sell it to someone else because it's not really, we see Aston Martins use AMG engines. I mean, it's probably better if you're a brand to have a brand agnostic, it's just an engine. You can whack your own badge on it and away you go. So I think it's pretty cool, and it certainly sounds pretty cool.
It's perfect for all these manufacturers sort of backtracking on their EV plan. Like, for instance, I don't think Porsche would do it because they probably need a bespoke engine for, but it's like, hey, we got to get a hybrid or an ICE Boxster Cayman to market in like 18 months. Quick. Ring these guys. And even if you use 80% of it or 75% of it, I think the most likely destination for this engine is probably the new GTR, because they've backtracked. They say, we're not going to build an all-electric GTR. No one wants one. We can't afford it. They've said it's going to be hybrid.
What a tragedy.
So yeah, I mean, an R36 with a 400 kilowatt twin turbo V6 with another 300 kilowatts of electrification.
I mean, the fact that it weighs 106, they're saying it weighs 160 kilos.
Yeah, that's light. I mean, that's hard to give context to, but apparently it's 10 kilos lighter than the next lightest V6 in production. Again, like Lotus need to make they just announced a new V8, but yeah, all these manufacturers are saying we need an engine stat. It's like, here you go.
Which is kind of great, which could be great for the performance community, right? Performance car loving community, because
absolutely
all these brands that we got to be electric, invest all the time in electric, and then it's like, well, now actually we need either a petrol engine or a hybrid engine. you don't have time to make it. Here you go. I mean, look, obviously you don't want cars to become too homogenous, but
But equally, I was thinking like you said, talking about other suppliers, like how many cars did we drive that had a ZF gearbox in it and still drive that have a ZF?
Yeah, exactly. They've all got this. I mean, those
really
screens. They're all the same screens. I mean, I guess an engine to me is maybe a little different.
Yeah,
agree. But look, if we are spared an electric Nissan GTR in favour of turbo V6 with a hybrid boost or whatever, I'll take it. Particularly a lighter thing that can be a bit more agile and fun to drive. I mean, I did love the old GTR. But it was a heavy beast, and I think if you try, the concept of adding electric motors and batteries to something like that is just scary to think about. So hopefully,
that's the thing.
Sounds fun.
It does. It's funny, like you say, the GTR. The GTR weighed like 1750, 1780.
Yeah, and that's all heavy.
That's not much more than a BMW M2 now. Like that's a light car in the context of 2.4
I'm old.
tons.
I want lighter cars.
Yes,
I'm from the Gordon Murray school of 1,000 kilos is heavy.
Oh, the other thing is, Horse actually signed a deal with Caterham, so that they will supply the engines now for the Caterham 7 going forward. Because I think they were started to use Ford engines, but they were running out of their life cycle, and they needed. So that's.
I don't know if a Caterham 7 needs a twin.
They're using they're using the 1.5, I think. But
okay, but that would be. That makes sense because a twin turbo V6 in one of those things, I think, would be. I believe that's what you call a death trap.
Character building.
Yeah.
Okay,
But I think.
Let us know what you
interesting.
think. Yep. Let us know what you think about extending ICE powertrains. But I think
are you
to this.
tragically sad that the loss of cars, electric GTR and electric BMW M3?
I know.
I will
No
remove
more
my
electric Boxster and Cayman and stuff like that.
Oh, I'm tearing up.
What is weird? Actually, before we move on, the powertrain, the Horse V6 comes as a package, right? You get the batteries that are integrated, and it comes with a 4-speed gearbox, which is kind of odd. I suspect there might be some trickery there in that the electric motor may use a 2-speed gearbox, which would then get you to 8, kind of like a.
I reckon that's just like a printer, right? They basically give you a half-full ink cartridge, so you come back and spend more money on ink. So you probably just have to get a 4-speed, then you got to go back and get the 6 or 8-speed.
Right, it's like an option, like a Ferrari or a Porsche options list. You want 5 or 6 or 7 or 8.
Oh, you want more gears? So you don't want a 4? You don't want 4 on the floor? Okay, weird.
Yeah, anyway, let's move on to more high-performance automobiles. You've been driving a Hilux Workmate.
Oh, mate. To quote Lightning McQueen, I am speed. What
are your thoughts on this? I have no idea what you're going to say about this or why you wanted to talk about it. So.
Well, I want to talk about it because obviously it's a big deal, right? It is literally one of the best-selling vehicles in the country. Mm-hmm. There's been a lot of talk about it. Finally drove the Workmate, which, for those unfamiliar,
was it a manual?
Sort of the working class. No, it was an auto, fancy. But $53,990 for a car with the steel wheels, base pack, cloth seats, all that sort of stuff. It is a lot of money for a pretty basic car.
Was it good though? Did you enjoy it?
And that's the bigger issue for me is Toyota have sort of gone down this path in recent years of kind of updates and facelifts rather than newer cars. There was a lot of talk when this generation Hilux was under development. There was a lot of talk of is it going to be on that the new TNGA F, their new ladder frame chassis that's underneath the Prado, it's underneath the Tundra and Tacoma, and that made sense. You'd think, okay, you update it, you've got this modular platform that can work across these things. It kind of future-proofs Hilux, but it's a warmed-up version of the IMV platform.
Yes, that sounds right.
That dates back to Ben
Hur.
20 years ago. When I had hair. It's a long time ago, and it's starting to feel it. It's starting to feel dated. It doesn't feel anywhere near as nice as a Ranger or.
Do buyers care?
Well, I think that is the risk Toyota runs, because there's certainly an element that are just going to buy, because it is, in some ways Toyota's taken if it ain't broke, don't fix it philosophy, right? But we've seen other car makers take that attitude, and it has ended up biting them on the arse. I've just written a piece for Cars Guide, which you'll be able to read, where I sort of, pose the question is, are they in danger of becoming the new Holden? Holden sort of felt like they were invincible, and they just kept doing what they were doing. And by the time they realised they were going down the wrong track, it was too late. They sort of burnt their brand equity on rebadging Daewoo's. Commodore became less popular, and then they were stuffed. Right? They had nothing to sell. They destroyed the belief people had in the brand. Now, I don't think Toyota's going to. These Toyotas aren't terrible. They're not. Let me be crystal clear. They are not Daewoo Holden bad, but they are. They just don't feel. I mean, it's the same with the RAV4. It's the same. Look, Camry, I totally understand. Toyota Camry, it's a sedan. It's in a shrinking industry. It's a shrinking segment. Fine, and to a degree, I almost understand the Hilux, because it is an incredibly competitive segment, and you don't want to spend a lot of money.
Toyota thinks we've reached peak ute. They think the segment's going to decline. Or it's a bit more fragmented, at least.
And that's the reality is, it feels like they've accepted that it's peak ute and it's not worth to me, like I say, I don't know the business case behind it. I don't know the numbers, and the investment and all that sort of stuff. But it feels like, we're getting the cheaper Hilux because, like, why spend the money on it? And that to me just feels a little bit weird. And I think, so in some ways, this idea that they've reached peak ute and it's going to get more fragmented, how much is it's a little bit chicken and egg, right? Like, if you set that outcome as people are going to buy less of these, so we'll put less effort into it. Yeah. Well, then people are going to buy less of them, and so you're technically vindicated. But if you made it better, more people might buy it. I don't know. Like, it's a tricky one.
It's the age-old Toyota question in that they have the resources and the knowledge and the wherewithal for every vehicle they release to be the best in class. They could do that. They don't, and that's what makes them, I saw recently that their first quarter profit had taken a big hit and was only $5.9 billion for the first quarter in profit. Not revenue, profit. Yeah. So again, I'm with you. Would it be cool to see Toyota take the Ford approach? When Ford did the last Ranger, they're like, we're going to try and make the best Ute we can. Yeah. We're going to revolutionise the segment. And they did. And then it forced others to up their game, and they've been rewarded for that. Whereas Toyota, I understand, they're like, we don't think this segment's going to keep increasing. I think one of the key factors at the moment is to bring down your break-even point. So again, if they spent $600 million on the facelift instead of $1.5 billion, so if they sell less, they're like, mate, we're still making like 25-30% margin on every car. It's going to work out for us, and that gives us more money to spend on the BZ4X or the Hilux EV or whatever comes down the track. So it's one of those things. It's like
but to me, that's spending money in the wrong places. Like an electric Ute. Electric Utes have not worked, right? No. Ford could not get an electric F-150 to work. No. So I think if you're worried about spending money and you want to save money on something, electric Ute is probably the number one spot to start saving money.
Yeah, I don't think we'll ever see an electric Ute outside of a mine site, to be honest. But anyway, So I've actually, in a kind of a neat bit of coincidence, I've actually spent the week in a Navara ST, which isn't a base model. I guess the direct competitor for a workmate is a Navara SL. That's your Bogo stripped down. This is an ST. It's the next rung up, but it's still very much.
How much is it?
It's like 55.5 plus on road.
Crazy expensive these things.
Well, I'm going to get to that in a second, but
sorry.
It's still the workhorse, right? It's got a 4-leaf rear end to the 3. It's very much for you buy this Ute to work. Full of plastic interior, very basic, cloth seats, blah 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 blah. And it got me thinking as I got in it. I'm like, one of the first thoughts I had when I got in, I'm like, this car is the same price as a BYD Shark, with 320 kilowatts and whiz bang interior and all the bells and whistles. And I kept going back and forth with this in my mind during the week. There's nothing wrong with a Navara, okay? It rides pretty tough because it's built to have a load in the back of it. If it's unladen, it rides pretty tough. It's very basic inside, but you've got wireless smartphone mirroring. You've got everything you need. You've got a really annoying driver monitoring, but that's okay. You can turn that off. And I did wonder, though, compared to a BYD Shark, it's terrible value, okay? In terms of features, performance, yeah, it can tow a little bit more, but, you know, line the two up for most people, and it's going to be a joke. But I did wonder, we were just talking about that BMW M3 thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that actually the right product for the sort of person that wants that sort of ute? A BMW M3 ute. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Yeah. Well, it's been done before. Is the Navara ST, the basic Hilux, are the people they're talking to, are they going to look at a BYD Shark and see complexity, see things to go wrong, don't trust them? So it's interesting in terms of framing the review and looking at the review and placing it in context. It is easy to go, like, compared to some of the newer competition, Navara's way off the pace in performance. It's got a rattly diesel in it. But there's probably a reason the Isuzu D-Max is still well inside the top 10.
Mate, it's
favourite cars.
It's the third best-selling ute, typically, month on month.
Yeah.
Ahead of Shark. Like, Shark has sort of settled into that number 4 spot.
So what do you think?
I think you're right. I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of people that don't give a crap that the new Hilux is on, whether it's on the old platform or a newer platform, or has the new engine or the old engine. They want a Hilux because they might have owned 3 or 4 Hiluxes before it, or they've, Hilux. As crazy as it probably sounds to performance car fans, Hilux is an aspirational brand for a lot of people. A lot of people aspire to have a brand new Hilux, and so that's why they can charge $54,000 for a base car, pretty much. It's going to do the things that it says on the tin, right? It's going to be a hard-working ute. It's going to. It's not going to get bogged. It's not going to break down. It's not going to, the servicing should be reasonable. You can go and get it serviced pretty much anywhere. You should be able to get, decent money on the resale value for it. Like, it does all the things that you expect to use. There's a reason why they're really, really popular, and so, I get the Toyota mentality of, like, it ain't broke, so let's not fix it. But at the same time, it's a funny one to me that they just, seems like something you could make nice, but
that's like sitting this Navara and going, okay. Again, if you did a comparison test, it would probably lose. I've got inverted commas up on every sort of objective measure, but equally, if you're like a farmer or work in the country or whatever, I can see them getting in Navara and going, oh, cool, to adjust the aircon, I've got a little toggle here.
Yeah, you just turn the
screens and I don't have fancy leather seats that are ventilated, but great, doesn't mean it means I won't get mud through the whole interior. So I'm not trying to make excuses for the legacy auto, because again, with what especially the newer manufacturers are offering, you go $60,000 for a basic ute with nothing in it, like what are you doing? Come on.
Well,
but it might be what the market needs.
Well, the kicker is, I will soon be off driving the new BYD Shark. They're introducing a cheaper version, right? They're going to have a more affordable version of the Shark. If they have a cab chassis or and that sort of thing, as they expand that range, are these brands going to come under more pressure? Are people buying? Because I do think, arguably, in some ways, I'd be surprised if there was a lot of, dare I say, Hilux and Navara buyers that want a working ute that are probably swapping it for a Shark. Yeah. I would hazard a bet that the people getting the Sharks are probably more of the, family vehicle variety, right? They want a lifestyle ute rather than a, chuck crap in the back, in the tray and get it dirty and I don't really care. I personally haven't seen too many Sharks at work sites, but that's not to say they're an incapable car. It's just that's probably the buyer type, is they want that efficiency, whereas people want, when they want a Hilux, they want a hard-working ute. And so, it's interesting. It's going to be interesting if BYD can crack that market and say, you want a hard-working ute? Well, we can do hard-working with more efficiency and at a cheaper price. Like, then that really does put a test on Toyota and Nissan and Mitsubishi and Isuzu and those sorts of things to see, how they really stack up. And because there is potential that we haven't actually reached peak ute.
I mean, I spoke to Jack recently, and they had big designs on the fleet market because there's obviously such a big volume there, and I think that's what BYD's going after with the cab, because the big news with the cab chassis is a lot of these plug-in hybrid utes or electrified utes, you couldn't change the tray on them, which is obviously a huge no-no if you're a fleet, because they want to adapt the body to their needs.
100%.
So the fact that you can now get a cab chassis, put your own tray on it, opens up a whole world in terms of electricians or carpenters or builders or whatever. So it will be interesting, as you say. Suddenly it's an option. It's not just a lifestyle ute, and it can tow 3.5 tons. So we'll see. But I actually also had a note here. These base utes are still fun to drive. If you hypothetically found one of these base utes on, say, a forest in a gravel road, fun can be had. That's all I'm going to say. But speaking of fun, you posited an interesting question of, if you had 40 grand to spend, what would you get? And I sort of thought back at you as like, so the cheapest performance car on sale these days is the Hyundai i20N, which is like high 30s. Essentially, it's like 42 grand drive away, depending on your state.
Which is a heck of a lot of money.
It is a lot of money. So let's go with, if you were thinking of buying an i20N, brand new, but you're like, let's broaden the field and see what is out there in the used market, what can I get instead? So let's do 3 each, and you can go first. So instead of buying a new i20N, what would you use the money for instead, Stephen?
Well, it's a good question. I guess I'd say it's a good question because I sort of posed it, didn't I?
Tell me again how good I am.
Great ideas. Yeah. Well, what was interesting is I did a little bit of digging on our friends the classifieds on carsguide.com and car sales. I managed to find, I was a bit surprised, but I found several examples of those first GR Yaris, 2020, 2021, that era. For they're sort of still in the mid-30s, which is frankly actually probably on the expensive side, which is why I'll nominate it first, because I'm working backwards. We usually work forwards, but I may have stuffed that up.
I mean, if it was a base model, they were 39,500 when they first came out.
So they haven't really dropped all that much in the grand scheme of things. But if you are looking for, like I say, fun under $40,000, they are pretty fun. To be honest, I wasn't as enamoured with the GR Yaris as everyone was, because I think missing that centre diff hurts it.
The first GR Yaris, the one that came out before the rally, was crap.
Yeah, it was a bit. Yeah, and on the Dunlop tyres, which were frankly terrible, and like in the wet, it was not a fun car to drive. But having said that, if I like looking like say mid-30s, like I'd give it a crack, put some new tyres on it. Like obviously
I saw these as well, and I didn't see what the cheapest rally was. And funnily enough, I just picked up the new facelifted GR Yaris today.
Oh, right.
Which is the rally. It's the bells and whistles. It's the aero pack. I think it's also like 65 grand, which is kind of scary. But yeah, I think I drove these things a lot when they came out, and I was with you in that the overseas reviews came out. Everyone was frothing over it. They were mainly what got called the rally here. We got the one without the diffs on the Dunlop tyres. At 39,500. It was kind of okay as that special drive away, but then it reverted to 50 grand. I'm like, this thing is
it's not a $50,000
crap.
car.
It's not a fun car to drive. It had a great engine, but without the diffs and everything. And then the rally came along. You're like, oh, this is the car it's meant to be. Suddenly it was adjustable. It was much quicker, but it was also like 55 grand.
Yeah.
The other thing is, very well supported aftermarket for those cars. So if you can get a base one cheap, like I say, 35 grand.
35 grand, you talk them down maybe. You can get it like I say, that's where it appeals to me. As a mid to low 30s car. That's where it has appeal.
Yep. So like you said, 6 new tyres on it.
Yeah.
You can put the diffs in them aftermarket for probably $4 or $5,000. A friend of mine did that. I'd say great choice.
Good choice, not a great choice.
Good choice, but buyer beware. Don't expect to buy one of the original cars and go, oh, I've got this transcendent hot hatch, because it needs a bit of love.
Yeah.
But okay, interesting.
Right. What have you got? What are you going to kick off your list?
So I've gone with Golfs. I found I think as time goes on, I think it seems to be generally accepted that Mark 7, Mark 7.5 was almost sort of peak Golf. Really well made. It was beautifully. It was more fun than Mark 6. You're making a face. You don't agree.
I don't. Yeah, I disagree. But continue.
Okay. What's peak Golf then?
I don't know. Like arguably Mark 5, as ridiculous as that sounds.
Yeah, possibly.
I think by 6 and 7. When you say 7, 7.5, and it's the reason I don't. I mean, obviously, this is sort of the Golf is kind of the poster child for what's wrong with this segment, right? Like the Golf is now both loaded with technology, like it is absolutely jammed packed with, like everything that's kind of getting in the way, frankly, of driving. Like the simplicity of a hot hatch, right? The original GTI was small car, big engine, right? And now it is small car, big engine, torque vectoring, blah, 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 X diffs, blah, 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 blah. And it costs $60,000.
Yeah,
that's the crazy thing is it costs like $60,000. It's gone up like 50% in the last couple of years, in the last 10 years almost. Like, but to me, it's really the thing is like if it was $60,000 and it was still really fun to drive, you go, all right. But I just have not necessarily been in love with those cars because I think they're doing so much for you, and it's like that's not what I want a hot hatch. That's not what I want in a hot hatch at all.
Interesting. So. I found a 2018 Golf GDI, so Mark 7 GDI, for $40,000, which sounds a bit expensive, but this has 10,000 Ks on the clock. So again, if you're looking at a new Golf GDI and thinking, geez, that's a lot of money, or it's a bit complicated, I don't like the haptic buttons. Well, someone's at the moment is selling a essentially brand new Mark 7 for $40,000, so that's not too bad.
That's not bad.
Equally, the same money gets you a Golf R of 50,000 Ks, but what I might go with is
the Golf 7R.
Yes, Golf 7. This was a 7.5, which I loved. But this one is I think this was a 7, not a 7.5. It was a 2018 Golf R manual, 75,000 Ks for $35,000, and that is a really sweet everyday car. Rode well, great gear change, fast car, entertaining handling. It was kind of what the fast Golf always was. Are there more entertaining hot hatches? Yes, there are, but all weather, all circumstance, practical.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Look, if you want something sort of fast and a bit fun, but also is going to do the 9 to 5 Monday to Friday well, then that's where the Golf kind of excels, right?
Yeah,
it's a bit more grown up, it's a bit more polished, but not as much fun.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll defend the Golf R. I think it was a lot more entertaining than Mark 6. A lot cheaper than Mark 8. So that's my opening gambit. Okay. What do you got number 2? Okay.
I'll tell you what.
Probably not a Golf.
I will flip it. I'll go the anti-Golf because I remember driving, must have been Golf 6 and this car at the same time at what is now known as One Raceway. I'm going to say like a circa 20. I found a 2016 Ford Fiesta ST for $15,000. In fact, I found a couple of them.
So you're going well under budget.
I'm going way under budget. I got plenty of money for fuel. Petrol's expensive, man. If you want to do track days, you got to stock up. So I've gone real like cheap. Now, obviously, it's a European-built Ford. So I would probably also, if you've got $40,000 to spend on a hot hatch, I'd keep a little bit of your powder dry in case anything goes wrong. But some of them are relatively like, I mean, still under 100,000 Ks after 10 years. Like,
I think that car is pretty robust. I think the one after, the more modern one, which is a fantastic car, they are a bit questionable, especially
I found you can get those around sort of the early 20s. I looked at those as well. But what I loved about that previous gen, that sort of mid to teens, was the simplicity. It was small car, big punchy engine, right? And a manual gearbox, didn't have diffs and stuff.
26 grand when they were new.
Yeah.
26 grand.
Yeah. So like these days, what you can get for that price is like a Chinese hatchback.
BYD 801.
Yeah, Cherry Tiggo 4. Like, I mean, it's... Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably younger people going, what do you mean you can get a performance hot hatch for like 20, mid-20s? Like, that's insane. But, like, that's what it was. And it was so much fun. Like, it was such a fun car to drive. Fun on the road, because it wasn't crazy. But it was 100, from memory, it was about 147 kilowatts, something around there.
So that was... So I'm going to have the 134 and 147 on overboost. But...
Yeah.
You got 10 seconds at the time. And so, like, when are you ever at full throttle for 10 seconds at a time on the road? Never. So basically, you always had the extra run.
And it was just fun. And that's the thing, because, like we were saying before, like, you didn't need 200 kilowatts.
No.
You don't need to drive that fast on the road. So, yeah, I mean, it's... I just think it was... not necessarily peak hot hatch, but it's one of those, like, amazing examples. If we're having a hot hatch Hall of Fame... That car's in it, right? Like it's just a stud.
If we had to put together like a feature on like the top 5 performance cars of the 2010s, without going silly cars, like Ferraris and stuff, you could make a real strong case for that car being in it.
Oh,
for the combination of value, fun, performance.
Yeah.
The seats were a bit huggy, and the brakes were maybe a bit marginal for track work, easily fixed with some pads for like $200.
Yeah.
As many people did. I can't speak highly enough about that car. They are magic.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, that's my choice.
Okay, and you've got 25 grand to throw a cool party.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can buy one for me as well and still be under budget.
Yeah, exactly. See?
Woohoo!
Matching. All right, what have you got next?
I'll stick with this Ford theme then.
Oh, okay.
Because another car I love. Am I going to take one of your cars now?
Possibly.
I am, aren't I? Lots of these around. Ford Focus RS Mark III. You can't have 2 Fords in your 3 cars.
I can. I like they're good cars.
They are good cars.
To be fair, I was desperately trying. I was playing the hot hatch angle, so I'm staying away from Toyota 86s on this list. Yeah. So
I mean, I was surprised. There's actually quite a few of these around. For the equivalent WRX STIs that are around the same price, everything from 2011s to 2005s to 20... This slaughters all of them. Sorry, the Focus RS is such a better car in stock form than any WRX STI I've ever driven. Again, there were some questionable reliability things around these cars. Do not buy one that I think it's been tuned. I found one with 500 horsepower, and that engine had a lot going on. Engine had a lot going on from stock. So, but every time I drove that car, the ride sucked. And the seating position was too high in true Ford fashion. But
they do love a high seat.
But I went on the international launch of that car. I was very lucky. I spent so many miles on road and track in that car. Loved every second of it. I found one that was limited edition, so you got the front diff as well. That made it even better. Didn't really make a huge difference, but why not? For like 35 grand. And when you consider like Evos are great, okay? Love an Evo. But if you're speaking reliability, do you want a 20, 25-year-old Evo or a 7-year-old, 8-year-old Focus RS? So, again, expect it to have maybe some maintenance, but I love the Focus RS Mark III. Love it.
Yes, I also loved it. That would have been my next pick, just to be fully fortified. But yeah, I loved it. I was with you, mate. I absolutely loved that car. I loved the previous generation as well, the 2-wheel drive.
Yep.
Limited
I think that's the future classic as well, because it was rarer. You got the 5-cylinder, and it was a wild car to drive. But
it was. I mean, they're just great. It's just a great car, and you could get the drift brake with it if you were so inclined. It's that to me, it's a special car.
The Focus RS was my problem when the GR Yaris came out, right? Everyone was frothing about the GR Yaris. Yeah. Even the Rally at 55 grand. I'm like, hang on. Did everyone forget that we used to be able to buy a Ford that was faster, more powerful, 5-door, larger, and it was 5 grand cheaper than this thing was?
Yeah. I mean, yes. Having picked the Yaris, I do I'm fully aware that it was a deeply flawed car in its initial guise. I just think it just was not as amazing as everyone thought it was. It really did sort of have some issues, shall we say.
So having cut your lunch, what are you going to do now?
Well, I'm going to break glass in case of emergency. I looked at a few things, right? Because obviously trying to find hot hatches. I did find, believe it or not, I found the previous gen Civic Type R 2017 for $39,990.
Wow.
With a whopping 100,000 Ks on it. Over 100,000 Ks. So I couldn't in good conscience recommend that. And then really in this sort of price bracket, it's actually hard to get a Civic Type R.
Yes.
As good as they are. I think the third gen ones you could get, but again, you're paying a premium. It's starting to get old. You're talking sort of, early aughts, like sort of late aughts, 8, 9, 10 sort of thing. So So I guess for me, the emergency performance fun under 40 car would have to be the Subaru WRX.
Okay.
And I think. There's plenty of that's the thing. There's plenty of choice, and so it's hard to kind of sort of pin one down. I would say, for me personally, I did look. I think I found one for around 30,000 for the sort of superseded model, which is the one I like. That's probably what I would get. To be honest, I don't even remember what was that model designation on that one.
I can't remember. Yeah, I can't remember.
It's the one that's not the current. The slightly underwhelming one that they have. It's
like the 2014 to 2020 or something. Or
yeah. It was just, that's the thing. They kind of, for years, they wanted to make a more sophisticated, everything's, we want to make a more sophisticated WRX. And then they made one, the current car, and it's kind of boring, right? Like, it's kind of sensible. And it's like, it's like your friend who used to be really into doing interesting things, and then he got a corporate job, and now he's boring. I think that era WRX was probably the sweet spot where it wasn't too agricultural, it wasn't too basic, but it was fun. Still a fun car to drive.
I'm going to say something that might cause people to drive off the road if they're listening to this, or spit their coffee all over the computer.
Are you going to hate on the WRX?
No, it's a better car as a CVT too.
Yeah, okay, I think we'll just end this podcast here. What the heck? CVT?
Stephen Ottley is now looking for a new podcast.
If anyone would like to podcast with me, please hit us up. You just have to, the only requirement is you can't like CVTs.
I can't. What do you say? I drove them and it worked well. Like that gearbox with its fake ratios and stuff like that, it worked really well with that engine. It covered up some of the lag. It made it punchier. I actually quite like the current WRX because they shortened the ratios a lot in it. Like driving that car as a manual, it's literally like driving a 306 kit car and being dual panizza. You're changing gear every 2.5 seconds, which makes you feel like a rally driver. And I think that's really what you want.
Yeah.
When you drive a WRX.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean the other good thing about the WRX is, like, sorry Subaru, but they've kind of felt the same to drive for like the last 20 years. So it doesn't really matter which one you've...
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing, right? There's nothing overwhelmingly different between, that generation, the generation before. I mean, to be honest, again, this will be a bit of a hot take. I didn't mind the hatch shape. I thought the hatch was actually kind of a cool shape. I certainly loved it, with the big wing and stuff, rally style, Ken Block, Gymkhana 2 era. It was cool. So, and look, maybe I watched too many episodes of Gymkhana when I was a kid, but there's something about Focus RSs and Subaru WRXs.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to finish this off with a car that I'm glad you didn't mention because I wanted to. It's actually a friend of mine selling this car, and I'm not getting any kickbacks. Probably should. Simon, if you sell the car based on this, I want to cut.
So inquiries to Scott. If you want this car, hit up Scott. He'll broker the deal.
Especially as I told him to buy it in the first place. It is a 2015 Renault Megane RS275 Trophy R. It has 32,000 Ks on it. I can vouch for Simon. He looks after his cars. He's got quite a good collection. He's just moving it on to get something else. 39,490, so just ticks under. But I mean, this is a forgotten car. there's a lot of interesting things about this car. One, they could not give these things away when they were new. But B, they made 250 of these worldwide. 250 worldwide. If you want a rare car, if you want a rare hot hatch, a future collectible, sadly 50 of those came to Australia, which was way too many, and they could not shift them. I think they sold about...
Which is crazy.
I know.
Well, that's the thing. This is that era when they would say, they did because they were sponsoring Red Bull, they'd have a Red Bull in limited edition and blah, blah, blah. And I used to joke, and there was a Trophy R, and then there was this special edition and that special edition. And I used to joke, well, the special editions were, they were limited edition in the sense that's all they could sell, right? They could only sell 50 or whatever a year, so they would sell those 50.
Yes.
It's like everything was a limited edition because there's only so much you can sell.
But this is the special one.
Yeah.
So this was the one stripped out, 2 seats, only weighed 1275 kilos, cup tyres, all the bells and whistles. Again,
to set the lap record at the Nurburgring.
That's right.
Okay, so just to rub it in because you stole my Focus RS, I will say I actually did drive this car at the Nurburgring.
Oh, that's good.
I did the international launch for this car and drove the second time I drove at the Nurburgring was this car, and literally the first lap at speed at the Nürburgring was in this car. Well, we was actually in the regular. We didn't drive the trophy. I actually got a passenger ride with former World Rally driver Jean Regnotti, who was, I believe, in his late 60s at the time. But he was not slow.
No.
I think once you got it kind of thing. And it was awesome. Yeah, it was an awesome car. Akrapovic exhaust sounded sick. It was a cool car. Built purely for a singular purpose, right? Like these.
Oh yeah, and on tyres up to temperature, on a good road, there's not many things faster than it. Like the quarter speed that car could carry on cup tyres, super light, not a great engine. The gearbox wasn't amazing, but awesome thing. I mean, there is another one for sale slightly over. I think it's like 42 grand with 7,000 Ks on it in black, and it looks wicked. So if you want a collectible, go and buy that one. But yeah, I mean, 40 grand for a really, really special car. Like there's so few of these in the world. So yeah, that rounds out our classifieds. Let us know what you would buy in the hot hatch market for 40 grand. Maybe you'd find a Renault 5 Turbo or something. But now let's move on to motorsport. I'm going to hand the floor over to you, Stephen, because we're coming up to the Nurburgring 24 hour. Great race, amazing race we've both been lucky enough to have attended. But who's going to win this year?
Well,
there's some up-and-coming racer attending, isn't he?
Yes, there's this guy. He hasn't to be fair, he hasn't done a lot of sports car racing. He's done some sort of open wheel stuff. I believe his name is Maxwell Verstappen. And, obviously there is a lot of hype. I believe this year's race is a sellout, which is impressive because it's always a mega race. If you've never been to the Nürburgring 24 hours, you don't have to stand it. It is like old school Bathurst 1000. It's like Bathurst 1000 in the 90s. Maybe not quite as, quite as hectic. But, instead of Ford versus Holden, it's Mercedes versus BMW versus Porsche versus Audi kind of. It's got that. It is that great nationalistic pride. It is.
And there are 500,000 drunk Germans camping in the forest.
Yeah, 250,000 people, in the forest for days. I remember, so when I drove that Renault at the Nürburgring, it was just before the 24 hours, about a week before, and I kid you not, there was some serious carpentry going on. Like, they were building, a viewing platform, like a 2-story viewing platform, like just punters. Like it was they just wandered into the forest with their timber and started knocking up like a structure like a week in advance. Like it's crazy. So, awesome event. I cannot stress this enough. If you're a car racing fan, you have to go to this race. It has to be on your bucket list. It is so good. But yeah, look, obviously this year's race is going to have way more attention on it than it ever has. Like, this is the thing. When I got into it, it was obscure. Like, it was so random. I used to, literally, when I was working for Auto Action, and I was in the position to commission stories. I would commission stories from our sports car riders just because I wanted to know about, the Alzane brothers like turbo Porsche thing that was like 10 seconds faster than everything else, but needed like twice as many pit stops. Like it's just a weird event. But now it's obviously the main class. It's GT3. Max will be there in his Mercedes.
And all the lead guys
AMG.
are psychos. Like they're all psychos. Kevin Estra, Timo Scheider, blah 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 blah.
This is the thing. There's just a group of drivers in Europe that are expert at this race, and that's the thing. And that's where Max, he's amazing. He's a great driver, and he's obviously taken to the Nordschleife like a duck to water. But it's a 24-hour race. He can't drive the thing by himself. But he has got an absolutely stacked lineup with him. Lucas Auer, Jules Gounon, Danny Juncadella. They are three of the best GT sports car drivers. Three absolute guns in that Mercedes. Mm-hmm. So they 100% have as good a chance as any. They've had some stuff-ups, like some strategic, team management stuff-ups that have cost them. But equally, he hasn't blown everyone away. He's had some pretty good races. I've watching Max against Christopher Haase in the Audi, the R8. I mean, the balance of performance in GTs is really good. That will be a really competitive car. Last year's winners are basically back. BMW M4 GT3 with almost the same line. They've got one different driver, so that will be really strong. And then Porsche.
Manthey's still got a car in, have they?
Yeah.
The Grello?
The Grello is back. I think it's the 10 years of Grello. They've got... Now, fortunately for BMW, they've got Kevin Estra, who is the French ace. He may not be German, but he is right at home on the Nurburgring. He is an absolute gun. Yeah. He's got two really good teammates, but weirdly, it's a team of three, and their reserve driver, even though most cars run with four, their reserve driver is one Matt Campbell, Australian Matt Campbell. So that's a bit disappointing that he has not actually got a race seat.
That is strange. Like, if he's a reserve driver, presumably he's there.
Yeah.
And he's a Porsche IMSA ace. Why wouldn't you just stick him in the car?
He's raced at Nürburgring. He's done the lead-up races, so he's ready to rock and roll. So
how bizarre.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, look... there's other BMWs. There's the Apt team is running Lamborghinis.
Well, let's be frank. There's only one car that we want to win, and that's the wagon.
Well, the wagon will be great. I mean, there's the ironically HRT Ford Mustangs. If you're a old school V8 Supercars fan, you'll find that a bit weird that there's a team called HRT running Fords.
Is Jeff Grech running them?
No. Hopefully. Now, you never say never. It's a strange race. Anything can happen, but hopefully a kangaroo won't kill itself on the front of the Mustang this time around. They should be all right to avoid kangaroos at the Nurburgring. But they've got some good teams.
Something. If there was a kangaroo on Dottingham Straight, it would be quite something.
Yeah. But look, it's going to be awesome. And the coolest thing is, like I say, when I was younger and obsessed with this race and tried to watch it, it was so hard to find anything. It's going to be streaming. You'll be able to stream the whole thing. Tune in if you're a Max fan or not. If you just tune in because you're a F1 only fan and you just watch Max and you think Max is great, tune in and you'll see there's some absolutely awesome drivers that don't race Formula One, and it's going to be wide open and it's going to be awesome. It's going to be a really cool race. So it's 24 hours. Anything can happen on that. It's 24 hours around the craziest racetrack and most amazing racetrack in the world. So it'll be brilliant.
That's right. Anyone who thinks modern racing is at all sanitized, and yes, it is in some ways, watch this race because it is madness. But we'll wrap it up for this week.
Yes.
As ever, any comments, questions, let us know on socials or whatever. At Steve Drives Cars for Stephen Ottley, at Addicted to Sliding for me, and we'll see you next week to talk more cars. Bye for now.
Awesome. Bye.